Welcome to Something to Wrestle with Bruce Pritchard. Well, you know,
That's not a rib.
She pooted.
What a rib?
No, yeah,
There's no box of gimmicks.
rumor and innuendo.
I don't deal in rumor and innuendo. And was he there? I was there. I don't give a shit. I ain't scared.
I ain't scared of shit.
Fuck him.
You, Bruce.
I love you.
give me double cheeseburger, double cheese, double mayo, double onion, motherfucker.
Bruce Pritchard.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and we are live at somethingtowrestle.com. I call myself Conrad the Mortgage Guy, and I call JBL a friend. Maybe you can too. Ladies and gentlemen, he says it's his show, Something to Wrestle with John Layfield. John, how are you, man?
Bradshaw 316 says, I just stole your fucking podcast. Ha ha, yes.
Oh, well, all right. He's fired up about it. Hopefully somewhere Bruce is safe and sound, but we're getting our Wayback Machine, and I'm excited to talk about a topic that I can't believe you and I have never talked about, but way back when, 29 years ago this week, we were about to launch Survivor Series 96. It felt like a big watershed moment for the WWE and their momentum as they start easing into the Attitude Era. Sid is going to become the world champion. One of his best matches he ever had against Shawn Michaels in the main event. Stone Cold Steve Austin really steps up the competition against Bret the Hitman Hart. But right before that happened, at the Marriott Marquis in New York City, the WWE presented their third annual Hall of Fame induction banquet. So they did this in 93, and that was for a video introduction for Andre the Giant. But in 94 and in 95, the night before the King of the Ring, respectively, in Baltimore and Philadelphia, they had a Hall of Fame ceremony. And now we know that they're going to do one here in 1996 in New York City. But I think this would have been your very first time attending a WWF Hall of Fame ceremony. And this is before it's a television production and all of that jazz that we know it would become eventually. Take us back to 1996. You're at your first WWF Hall of Fame. I know how much you love and respect the history of the business. I know how much you love the WWF. This had to feel like a big deal. Tell us about the 1996 Hall of Fame ceremony.
This was a huge deal, you know, because I'd been working in the territories and I'd never been really anywhere, these big places, WCW, WWE. I'd worked with a lot of the guys who had gone to WCW and WWE because they'd come to Europe or they come to Japan, they come through Texas or whatever. So I'd worked with a lot of these guys, but this was all new to me. These were meeting guys that I just saw in magazines growing up. So this was really cool. And I didn't get the television of these guys. You know, I just saw magazines, you know, so I didn't, you know, I got the television of the Von Erichs. I got some of the Funks where I lived in West Texas, Sweetwater, Texas, but I didn't get WWE television, you know, especially the old school stuff. You got it later when it came out on Saturday morning, but you didn't get a lot of the old guys. So seeing a bunch of these old guys that I just heard about in magazines, and then of course I'd heard through the territories of guys working with these guys who knew a lot of these guys. It was really cool to be there and see all these guys in person and hear their speeches. And, you know, it was fun. You know, I'd never been anywhere, and, you know, to be able to sit in this, you know, incredible venue, sit there and have, you know, basically unlimited booze, which was a lot of fun back then as well. And then to get to see these guys, it was an absolute blast going to these things.
Hey, I want to ask you, you know, this is a weird time. You know, we're in the mid 90s and it's unusual that fans would have access to talent like this. There's not a lot of fan fest going on and things like that. We're still more protective of the business now. Social media hasn't really taken over the world. Do you remember it being a challenge for you to, hey, I'm in character, but not really, but I need to respect the business, but there's fans there and we're all in tuxedos. Like, it is a bit of a head scratcher. How do you prepare for something like this?
Well, we'd had, you know, events before, you know, different banquets and things where fans had been at. So you're used to kind of the idea of kind of being in a gray area of kayfabe, you know, at that time. You know, these are, you know, the term, I guess, smart mark or hardcore fan maybe it was out there then. I think I'd heard it about that time, but it wasn't really prevalent. People didn't really have this, entire group of really hardcore smart fans. They were there, but you didn't really that much association with them. And so it wasn't really a breakdown of barriers. It's kind of a gray area you'd already kind of gone through. And that's kind of what it was. I mean, these fans were, it's unusual for them too. They know not to ask anything. They kind of want to, know how much they can ask and how much they can't ask. So they're kind of feeling it out too. So it wasn't that uncomfortable of a thing. Conrad, we were there. I mean, they had these events we used to have. We used to have tons of booze back then. All the guys, drank pretty heavy, and we'd sit there and have booze and just laugh and talk and then tell stories. And you have these legends get up there. It was a pretty cool event.
It is a pretty cool event. I wish I would have been at these. I mean, we know that eventually this became a television show, and don't get me wrong, more people saw it, more people celebrated the legacy and history of these performers. So on that, I appreciate it. But I imagine a guy like you probably enjoyed this black tie dinner approach a little better than a TV show, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Because if you're not involved in the show, you don't really get to interact with the guys. So if you're just sitting out in the crowd, so if you're not a presenter or something involved in the show, you don't really get to interact with the guys. You see them like maybe before, you see them on WrestleMania weekend, but you don't really get to interact with them. I remember one time I was sitting there and I realized I'm sitting in catering with the Four Horsemen and Mike Tyson. And I'm just sitting, I'm sitting there. There's that people at the table. And I'm sitting there going, holy cow, this is the greatest moment of my life. I just realized where I am. It's pretty cool when you're involved to be in that. You don't get that in the big arena unless you're involved in the show. Here, everybody was involved. Here, everybody, they know who the boys are. They're all sitting around there having cocktails, telling stories. There's really nothing there between, these great legends and the current talent to interact. It's a lot more personable and fun. I understand why they do it in big arenas. I mean, you can put it in a ballroom like that and put 500,000 people, whatever it was, or you can put it in some sold out 12,000 seat venue or 15,000 seat venue. I understand why you would do it, but it's pretty cool being in that little kind of intimate atmosphere.
Tell us some of your favorite ceremony stories. I'm sure there have to be some fun ceremonies where, we're in this gray area where there are fans here, but it's mostly office people that we're surrounding ourselves with. We've got our own inside jokes. The booze is free flowing. You're going to be able to peel back the curtain a little bit and sort of pop the boys with some of the things that are said on stage. It feels like it lends itself to a lot of fun off the field stories. Do you have one or two you can share?
God, they were those legendary. When I inducted the Briscoes, and they told the first thing that Jack and Jerry told me, said, listen, our whole family's here. Don't you tell any native jokes. And I said, guys, I wouldn't do that. Okay. It's too big of a deal. First thing I said was, hey, I'll walk in here. And that's what I said on stage. And I see Jack and Jerry standing by the door. I said, hey guys, it's not a cigar store. It's the Hall of Fame. Come on in. And I told one native joke after another. And when I got done, I realized that they both had been drinking, and I thought they're going to stretch me on this stage. And as I go to walk off, I see Jack and Jerry heading at me, and Jerry's got that kind of side tilt head that he's had a couple drinks. And I thought these some bitches are going to stretch me on this stage in front of 10,000 people. And I literally headed off to the side. I wouldn't shake their hand because I knew if I shook their hand, it was too late. They're going to grab me and beat me up.
Just phenomenal. I'm glad that
the best pop that night was when I told the story about Georgia Championship Wrestling, and I put it in the context of Manhattan. They sold the island for some shiny beads and a little bag of bud, and the red man got the white man back when they sold Georgia Championship Wrestling to Vincent Kennedy McMahon Jr. And I heard the biggest guffaw laugh in the back. It was Vince. I could hear him laughing when I said that. He thought it was so funny.
I know that it had to be like we've heard through the years that sometimes guys would try to pop the Undertaker. If they could make the Undertaker laugh and break character, that was the goal. Was that a goal of a lot of guys with Vince when he was in the room? I know there's an era where he's behind the scenes promoting or, with the headsets on or whatever. He's running the show, producing the show is what I meant to say. But in the era where he's in the crowd, was that a goal? Like, let's see if we can make the old man laugh.
Not really, no, because Vince was adamant, and I mean adamant about do not mention my name one time. He would tell guys, do not, under no circumstances are you allowed to mention my name. And guys would just kind of take his word for it. He didn't want to be mentioned. He didn't want to be put over, because everybody that comes through there is going to say, hey, I want to thank Vince McMahon also for being here. The company, all that stuff. Vince did not want to be thanked. He did not want to be praised. He did not want his name mentioned at all. In fact, he would forbid his name from being mentioned because he wanted it to be about the legends. And so there wasn't a lot about that. I think some of the jokes you tell would make him laugh, and you'd look to see if he was laughing, to see if he's laughing. But it wasn't something where anybody else would really know that was some type of inside joke to Vince, because Vince was so adamant about the fact that he didn't want his name mentioned. I'll tell you the greatest speech I ever heard. I don't know if it's even out there on I'm sure it is on videotape somewhere. It wasn't this one, because I looked up the class of 96. It was a subsequent one when Bobby Heenan went in. Bobby Heenan was already losing his voice, and you couldn't really understand him that well. Here's a guy who's losing his voice. You couldn't understand it well. He got 2 standing ovations during the speech. I mean, I've always said, when they talk about who the greatest commentator is, what they really mean is who's second, because there's nobody close to Bobby Heenan.
I love hearing about the good old days, especially these old Hall of Fames. And man, I don't know why, but November 96 just seems like maybe one of my peak moments in my fandom. I loved that Survivor Series weekend, and I know it was a big weekend for you. I mean, we know we're going to see the debut of The Rock, and we're going to see Stone Cold level up. We're going to see the attitude in Shawn Michaels start to build when he drops the title to Sid. But Survivor Series 96 was still a pretty damn important show for you in your career too, wasn't it?
It was, and it was one of the worst nights of my life. I got counted out when I wasn't supposed to. Tim White, who's my dear friend, first time we first started getting the earpieces in, or something less changed in, or something had changed. Somebody was in Tim's ear, and for some reason he wasn't used to it, or something was different. And I think Bob Holly was the one that rolled me up. I'm supposed to kick out, and I didn't kick out. I did. I'm sorry, I got that wrong. I kicked out. Tim counted me out. So 1, 2, I kick out. You can look at the tape. It's clear. I kicked out. Tim counts 3. I'm supposed to go over. This is my big push in the Survivor Series. I'm one of the last ones in there. I don't know if I'm like the last one or whatever. I'm on the winning team. And Tim counts me out. That was Survivor Series, my first one. Madison Square Garden. And that disaster happens to me. I come backstage, and Jerry Briscoe meets me at the curtain, and he is furious. And he looks at me. He goes, "What is wrong with you? That is your big push. You don't kick out. What is wrong with you? We were counting on you. This was your big moment in Madison Square Garden." And I'm not going to tell him that Tim counted me out by mistake. I'm not going to stooge Tim White. And so I said, "I'm sorry." And Jerry goes, "That doesn't cover it." And he looks at the replay, and he sees me kick out, and he says, "Why would Tim count you out?" Because now he sees it. I'm like, I got nothing to say. I'm not going to stooge Tim. Tim comes back to me, and he is as apologetic. As soon as he counted me out, by the way, Conrad, he counts me out 1, 2, 3, and he looks up at me, and he realizes what he's done, and he goes, "I'm sorry, kid." And he goes, "You're out of here." The old referee mimic, "Get me out of here." But he felt terrible about it. And he told me later, he goes, "I wouldn't have blamed you if you punched me," which I would have never done. Guy's a legend and a good friend. Just made a mistake. But he came back and came straight to me, just like a man would, and said, "Kid, I ruined your moment in Madison Square Garden." And he said, "I am so sorry." And I said, "Tim, you're a legend. It was an honor to be out there with you. Shit happens." And I said, I think if my career gets over it, it was meant to be. And if it wasn't, it ain't meant to be anyway. I said, shit happens. And we shook hands and went out and had some drinks.
Have you ever been pissed off at anything that ever happened in your career? It feels like anytime something like this happens, you're like, oh, well, I guess it wasn't meant to be. Have you just really gone through life like that? Or is that something you adapted later in life?
Something I adapted later. I mean, I was a real hothead when I was younger. And I finally realized that I didn't have a lot of control over it. And like something like this, I mean, I was very disappointed and I was upset, but I'm not going to be mad at Tim. Tim made a mistake. That's all it was. He made a mistake, and he's a good friend of mine. And he'd have never done something like this on purpose. And what's it going to do? I ruin a friendship also because I act like a impetuous asshole, which, he probably, he would say he deserved. I say he didn't because he's a friend. So, No, I just always figured that, whatever happened, you can figure out a way around it. I just, life kicks you, man. Life kicks you in the balls sometimes. And you can either take it and cry about it and whine about it, or figure out what you're going to do about it.
Hey, speaking of Survivor Series, it's next week. And so I thought, hey, let's take a look and let's revisit some Survivor Series from 26 years ago this week. It was Survivor Series 1999 at the Joe Louis Arena in Detroit. This is probably the show best remembered for when they hit that motherfucker with a car. Of course, I'm talking about when Steve Austin had the hit and run angle, and how it parlayed into Big Show winning the WWF Championship later that night. But it also included the very first Chris Jericho and China match, but also Kurt Angle's televised in-ring debut. So it's a pretty substantial pay-per-view. Let's go back and talk about the China Chris Jericho match. This is obviously something that has been a hot button in wrestling for a little bit at this point, because on the other channel, we saw, Miss Jackie wrestling Disco Inferno, and I guess Disco didn't want to do it to the point that he wound up losing his job in WCW. He does agree to come back, but they want to make sure they get their pound of flesh. So he put Miss Jackie over in the ring. Was there any discussion about Jericho and China? Were the boys anxious to see how's the office going to handle this? How's she going to handle this? And how's Jericho going to handle this?
No, I don't think so. And I'd say I don't think so. I was there, and there wasn't a lot of discussion that I heard about it. China was considered different. They kept billing her as the ninth wonder of the world, and so she was considered different. Nowadays there's not that big of a stereotype between men and women. Lagatha in Vikings, was as great a warrior as Bjornsson or any of the other guys out there, so you have movies that are different now. It wasn't then, but this was kind of the first, but it was completely different when you had somebody build and looked like China. And I thought Chris did a really good job with it. And there wasn't as much pushback. There was a couple guys I think would have said no, but Chris was not one of those guys. Chris was there. Chris was all about business. He always has been. And I don't think any of the boys thought anything at all different about this match or anything else. We were wondering, Chris was obviously leading the match. Chris is a really good wrestler. China was an okay wrestler at best. So we knew that Chris was going to have to, work with a broomstick, as they say. And he did a great job with it.
Yeah, he did a great job with it. I totally agree. Let's talk about what you were doing that night. You're going to work the pay-per-view opener that night. It's a traditional Survivor Series elimination match where we would see you teaming with your pal Ron Simmons. You're still called the Acolytes, but you're not necessarily closely associated with the Undertaker at this point. But you're going to team with the Dudleys, and you guys will be taking on the Headbangers, D'Lo Brown, and Godfather. We're still a little bit away, maybe 2 months away from the Acolyte Protection Agency, or the APA, and that really sort of turns things around. Are you feeling any pressure at this point? Like, if the Ministry of Darkness and your association with the Acolytes seem to have moved on and that's no longer a priority, but you're still sort of painting yourself up with Ron and you're going through the motions, but it doesn't feel like you have anything to really sink your teeth into. Now, luckily, we know the APA idea is coming around very quickly, a couple of months from now. But in this, we'll call it lame duck period. Did you feel to yourself, damn, here we go again? Like, it feels like this happened once before with the new Blackjacks, right?
Yeah, it did. And that I knew they were treating me and Ron a little bit differently than me and Barry. And I don't know why they would. That's something for them. I can't read their mind as to why they would, but I knew they had some type of plans with me and Ron. I could just tell they didn't know what to do. That's a big difference. I could tell how liked we are. And plus, I'm tagging with, good Lord, this legend, this pillar of our industry in Ron Simmons. So is Barry Windham, by the way. And that didn't work, but I felt pretty good about this. I felt pretty good about being out there with Ron. I was sitting there on a contract, for the first time. And so I actually had something. I believe I had a contract at that time. Maybe I didn't. Maybe, yeah, I did. I did. Yes. So that's a little bit different, but still that thing can be done in 90 days. That contract, this contract is very, very one-sided, those old contracts, even though the money was legitimate and Vince paid you a lot more than the contract said he had to pay you. But I felt pretty good about being out there with Ron, even though they didn't have anything for us. I really kind of figured out they would. Wasn't positive about it, so there was a little apprehension, but I was having a good time, man. We were having so much fun on the road. The boys were fun. The business was freaking on fire, or starting to get there. It was a good time.
Hey, I want to, I know that we're sort of repeating the story because I think you've told us before, but I think it's worth mentioning because we're talking about sort of early to mid-November for the Survivor Series. And we know this is that lame duck period for the Acolytes. When you guys actually get to call yourself APA and you're less of this, I don't know, dark, evil character and more of just the real John Layfield and the real Ron Simmons, wasn't that all sort of born out of like a celebration for your birthday? You guys were hanging out and drinking or something later in the month of November. Just a couple of weeks after this is where Vince sort of gets the idea to pivot the characters, right?
Yeah, I run into Vince in a bar. We had, I told this before, and yes, we were in Philadelphia, and we're driving from Philadelphia down to Baltimore, and God, it was an afternoon show. Baltimore was the next day, and I'm riding with the Godfather and Teddy Long and Ron Simmons as usual. And Godfather says, "Hey, smoke this." And I said, "Godfather, you don't smoke that stuff. Just we're drinking. It's my birthday." And he goes, "It's your birthday." I go, "You're right. It is." And I said, "Just make sure I get to my hotel room." So I said, "I'll do whatever you guys want. Just make sure I get to my hotel room." So we get down to Baltimore and I'm gone. All I need to do is go to bed. That's what I'm going to do. Last thing you want to do is go to the hotel TV bar, because when you go in there, somebody's going to see you and turn you into Vince, that, oh, so-and-so was there. He was drunk. He's inebriated, whatever else, acting like a fool, try to get you in trouble. So we don't normally stay at the TV hotel. Don't go to TV hotel bars, nothing. Me and Ron always went to out of the way places. So we didn't get stooged and all that stuff. So, but I didn't have to get stooged. I ran right into Vince. So, I mean, yeah, walking in, that baritone voice, he goes, "It's your birthday." And I said, "Yes, sir." He goes, "Well, I'm going to buy you a shot of tequila." I said, "Well, that's the last thing I need, sir." So, but I sit there drinking. Next thing you know, I wake up. I got the horrible hangover from this tequila, which I don't like to drink tequila. But Vince was buying it, and if Vince could have bought me a cyanide, I'd have drank it. It's my birthday. You drink whatever people give you. And so I'm sitting there the next day. I go to the building. I've got this terrible hangover. They said, "Vince wants to see you." I said, "Oh, no, you got to be kidding me." I said, "All right." So I walk in there. Vince goes, "I'm going to put that on television." I said, "You're going to put what on television?" He goes, "You and Ron drinking. That's what men do. Men banter. They banter like that. That's what they do." And that's where he came up with the idea for the Acolyte Protection Agency. So it gets better. So I walk out. I couldn't find Ron when I went to the meeting because they want to see both of us because they're going to tell us about the thing. I just thought that was me by myself because I was in trouble. Anyway, they want to talk to me and Ron. Ron, I couldn't find him, so they called me in there by myself. I walk out and I walk right into Ron. Ron goes, "So you still got a connection in Japan? We fired?" And I said, "No." I said, "Vince wants us to drink on television." Ron looked at me and goes, "That's the best idea I've ever heard." So that's how the APA was founded. Vince saw us sitting there just having fun, drinking, and thought, I'm going to put literally Vince thought, I'm going to put that on television. And that's where the idea came up from.
John, do I have it right that this year on your birthday, you're going to be celebrating at WrestleCade in Winston-Salem? Do I have that right? November 29th. I can't believe this is real. You're going to spend your birthday with us at WrestleCade?
Yes, I am. I'm going to WrestleCade. I'm a last minute addition, and you're going to be there. We got a bunch of friends going to be there. We got some big stuff that we're doing, by the way. And yes, I'm going to be there at WrestleCade on my birthday. I'm excited about it. And by the way, there are people that have mentioned they brought up the APA and said they're the ones that created it. That may be true. I just know from the first time I heard about it was when Vince talked to me after seeing us, and that may be where Vince got the idea from. Maybe Vince came up from organically. I know I've heard some guys in the past say that they came up with the idea, and maybe they did.
Well, I can't wait that I didn't know until we started talking. It was like, hey, wait a minute. When is John's birthday in November?
Oh, the 29th of November. And I'm also the same birthday, but different century as Jerry Lawler, Dutch Mantell. They were born in the 1800s. And Dana Brooke.
Well, how about that?
That's right. There's there may be another one or two, but I know for sure Miss Brooke, because I always tell her happy birthday when it's around our birthdays. And the King and Dutch. My two buddies. They're born in the same year, I believe. King and Dutch. I share a birthday with,
I believe, is the
Yep.
year.
I share a birthday with some great folks. But yes, I'm going to WrestleCade. I hear they got a wrestling event that night. I may just go and clothesline a bunch of people.
Well,
it's my birthday. I'm going to clothesline the hell out of everybody.
We know what you're going to do. You're going to arrive, clothesline somebody, and leave. You can,
That's right.
Grab that shirt, available now at somethingtowrestlemerch.com. You see John sporting it there. Hey, and if you're in the Winston-Salem area at the end of the month, November 29th, come see John at WrestleCade. He's going to be doing meet and greets that afternoon. I think you've got tickets on sale now. For more information, just go to WrestleCade.com. Hey, let's talk about that Survivor Series moment when Steve Austin is going to be a victim of a hit and run. Of course, that's really to just explain why he's going to be off TV, because some really scary news. The guy who has led the charge to topple the NWO and allow Monday Night Raw the opportunity to beat Nitro in the ratings, Stone Cold Steve Austin, my man needs spinal fusion surgery. He's not going to be able to wrestle. And this has to be a lot of panic. I mean, you've been through the ups and the downs at this point in the WWE, but when you find out that your Hulk Hogan, your Bruno Sammartino, the guy who's the top guy of your generation, Stone Cold, is going down with a neck injury, are you nervous about what that could mean for business, or do you view it as an opportunity for someone else to keep that momentum going and step up?
You know, I don't know if everything I have here is a result of Stone Cold, but damn sure a lot of it is. I mean, my mortgage payment at the time was pretty much a result of Stone Cold selling out arenas. I mean, when a guy gets hot like that, and I've never seen a guy get hot like that. I mean, I know there were people in the past, from Londos to Hogan, that had gotten hot, Tommy Rich in the Carolinas, King down in Memphis, but I'd never seen anything like Stone Cold. Where you put any building in the world, you put his name on, we sold out. It was insane. And the money difference. Now, a lot of the world changed with the NWO and the whole Monday Night Wars and all that stuff. But Steve was our guy, man. He was our freaking Norman Schwarzkopf. He was the one, he was the guy that was storming Normandy. Steve was it. And all of a sudden we lose him. It was horrifying. I knew we had guys stepping up. I knew we were in a much better position, at least financially and attendance wise. Now, we had a great roster back in 95. We just had people in wrong characters and we weren't drawing any money. We're drawing money now. And thanks a huge part to, maybe even a majority part, to Steve. But we had other guys that were able to draw money. So it wasn't as horrifying, as scary as, say, when you had just one guy, because we had some other guys, but Steve was the guy. There's no doubt about that. And that's a scary thing when you're sitting there on the roster. And is it an opportunity for other people? Absolutely. You know it's an opportunity for other people. It still doesn't take away from the fact that every one of these buildings, they don't have black tarps anywhere on them because of Stone Cold. Do we go back to that or do we not? I mean, you know what you got with Steve. You don't know what you got with the next guy. Is it an opportunity? Yes. But it's also nerve-wracking. You better freaking believe it.
Hey, let me ask you about Kurt Angle. He's going to debut that night, defeating Shawn Stasiak. We've had weeks of promos on TV, so we've established that he's a, delusional Olympic character. But I don't think anybody would have ever predicted he would have the rookie year he had in the WWE. I don't even think it can be debated. The most successful rookie year in the history of WWE, maybe in all of pro wrestling. What was your initial? I mean, would you have guessed that or predicted that before you saw it? And if not, when did it click for you? Like, oh, this guy's going to be different.
No, I mean, how would you predict The Rock? How would you predict Stone Cold? I was there with Steve, was a ringmaster, and we knew this guy's this incredible hand, which we're going to talk about great hands later in the show. You knew Steve was this incredible wrestler and this great hand. Do you realize that he's going to become the guy that sells out every building you put his name on? I don't think there's any way to realize that. Do you realize that Cena's the guy? I mean, I knew Cena was the guy back in WrestleMania 21. Did that mean that he's going to go on and be 17-time world champion and make all these movies and stuff? No, of course not. I just knew he was good enough to be the guy to carry the title. I'm so happy that he became this guy. But with Kurt, you knew he was good. By the way, Kurt's first match he attended was when me and Ron beat up Public Enemy, and Kurt was like, "The hell with this." Really, you got to ask Kurt about it sometime. But when Kurt came in, I don't know if we had trepidation. We had trepidation not because of his talent. This guy's the best wrestler on the planet. This guy's not good. This guy's alien level. He could be the greatest Olympic wrestler of all time, people were saying. But to even be considered that is unbelievable. So we know how much talent he has, but he hadn't worked the territories. He hadn't worked this education background system to learn the business. Plus, he didn't even know the business. He just kind of came in it. Kurt is the most amazing story I think I've ever seen. I've never seen a guy come in when business was that hot. We had this incredible, talented roster. There were no voids, by the way. Kurt created his own way. And to come in and to do the things that Kurt has done, that guy is not once in a lifetime. That guy is once in about a 10,000 year performer.
Hey, so let's talk about Survivor Series from 2004. We're just Survivor Seriesing it out. This is always fun every November, but we're going to feel old because 21 years ago this week, Survivor Series 04 took place at the Gund Arena in Cleveland. And the top singles match is John Bradshaw Layfield successfully defending the WWE Championship against another friend of the show, Booker T. Now, of course, you and Booker go way back to the Texas indie scene, including the GWF. You guys had some tours of Japan and even South Korea. And given this history, this has to be a pretty damn cool moment. You guys headlining a Survivor Series pay-per-view for the title, just a couple of Texas boys who'd been all over the world together. What a cool story.
Yeah, an absolute cool story. I was so happy this happened in my career, and I just kind of feel like my career wouldn't have been whole without having a big-time match with Booker T. Whether he had the title, I had the title, I don't care about that. But it's so cool to have a championship match in a main pay-per-view with a guy that I started with at the Sportatorium, a guy I went to Japan with, a guy I went to South Korea with. I mean, a guy that I was so happy when he got his job in WCW, who I've rooted for my whole life. I wrote the foreword to his book. He's a dear friend of mine, and I love Booker. And the fact that I got to work this big match with him, my career wouldn't have been whole, I don't think, without having done this. So it was really cool that I got to be out there with him because I think the world of Booker and his wife, Sharmell.
I want to ask, and forgive me for not knowing the answer, but cagematch.net is a great resource, but it doesn't have everything. There's a lot of gaps for stuff like independence in Texas and South Korea and things like that. But I don't think you wrestled a lot of one-on-one matches with Booker T in your career. Is this the first one?
I believe it was.
WWE, I mean, it's not until WWE that it happens, right?
Yeah, we wrestled a ton of times in WWE. I mean, a lot of times, especially around that year. We wrestled a bunch. Always enjoyed working with Booker. What about a fun worker. Booker's great to work with. He's a tough guy, and he doesn't mind, if you whack him by mistake or what. He's not going to bitch or complain. He's just a guy and he likes to work hard. He goes out there and he works hard every single night. He wants to give the fans their money's worth. He's a fun guy to work with. I don't think we ever had a singles match in Dallas, and I'm not sure about Japan. I don't think we had a singles match because most of the time we were the heels. The Gaijin were the heels, and so Booker and I'm sure tagged together in Japan. I don't remember that for sure. I know for fact we tagged together in South Korea, or at least I say I know for a fact. Somebody may pull up the record now and show that we didn't, but I remember they had a head of the group there, Lee Wan Pyo was his name. He stole Booker's spinner-rooney. He had Booker come to the school and show him how to do a spinner-rooney, and he stole it from him in front of his own crowd. And so he was a typical promoter, putting himself over. And I lost the Korean championship every night. I'd walk out the Korean championship all over the peninsula. They didn't have TV. I'd go out there and lose it to Lee Wan Pyo every single night. But me and Booker did, I believe, tag some matches in South Korea. I don't know for sure about Japan, but I don't think we ever worked a singles match with each other.
I do want to ask you about this particular Survivor Series. There's a couple of things on here I want to bring up. We'll start with the show closing. The main event, the last match that night, is Randy Orton, Chris Benoit, Chris Jericho, and Maven, the YouTube star, beating Triple H, Batista, Edge, and Gene Snitsky. This is an elimination match, and the winning member, or each member of the winning team, gets to be a guest GM of Raw once over the next 4 weeks. That's kind of cool. I kind of like that as a stipulation. I know that Survivor Series, respectfully, has never been the A1 WWE show. People always talk about it like it's a great heritage show, and I get that. It's been around forever. It really was the second big event besides WrestleMania. But to me, WrestleMania is number one. I would argue SummerSlam or Royal Rumble compete for second and third. Then it kind of falls off a cliff. But I even think in a modern context, people might point to Money in the Bank as the next one. But Survivor Series, just the elimination format, and originally there are no stakes. They're just battling for bragging rights, I suppose. And then they tried to do the brand split, Raw versus SmackDown. It was hard for me to get excited about the elimination idea and concept. But hey, we're going to see the winning team. I don't know that this is enough to motivate me to buy the pay-per-view. But these guys get to be the GM. There's at least some stakes. Where did you land on the concept of elimination matches? Did it feel like a pay-per-view event? Would you as a fan have been as excited about this, or was there a flaw in there that we could have fixed? We just never did.
It felt like a pay-per-view, and it felt like a major pay-per-view, but it didn't feel like one of the big major pay-per-views. Now, obviously, you're getting down to, just two or three, as you mentioned, but there's no doubt it was the fourth. I don't think there's any doubt at all behind Royal Rumble and SummerSlam, and of course WrestleMania being number one. I don't think there's any doubt it was the fourth. It just was created. The story was created because Crockett was going to take a pay-per-view window on Thanksgiving Day, and Vince comes up with the idea literally just to block Crockett. And he strong-armed the cable providers and told them that if you take Crockett, you're not going to get WrestleMania next year. And so he put his pay-per-view on there so they wouldn't lose the revenue and actually probably make a lot more because Vince had a better distribution with his WWE. And it was just a matter of blocking Crockett. So that's why the whole thing was created. Doesn't mean it was a bad idea. There was just no real reason for a lot of these matches. You had elimination matches, and then you had somebody raise their hand at the end, but there wasn't something behind it. You have something behind almost everything else. And so I think it really was treated like a second-class citizen, which I think it probably should have been. It really wasn't it was a unique idea, but I think you got to have something at the end of it for every team to win that's meaningful. And most Survivor Series had nothing.
Is Survivor Series the most successful spite store in wrestling history?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I got to hear Vince tell a story a couple times. It's just a great story. It's just Vince loves to tell stories. And when he tells stories, he waits for the right moment to hit the perfect line. He goes, and along came WWE. It's great. And he said all of a sudden they couldn't carry anybody else's pay-per-view. It was so cool to hear Vince tell the story about how he came in and blocked Crockett from taking the Thanksgiving Day weekend. We used to have back in the day, Christmas Day was our biggest day of the year back in the territories. For whatever reason, good Lord, man, Christmas Day was the day that you drew the biggest house of the year. Everybody had their families together. They need something to do after you unwrap presents or whatever you do in the morning, depending on, your beliefs. And people need something to do on Christmas night. We used to draw huge shows, and Thanksgiving was pretty much like not as close as Christmas, but a good time for wrestling. And this was Crockett stepping into that Thanksgiving Day window, and Vince seeing it and realizing that he was behind on it and deciding he was going to jump the line.
I don't know why, but I get excited when you say Vince loves telling stories. You revealed last week and turned the internet upside down that Vince may or may not be working on a book. We don't have any concrete information. But do you think Vince will ever have a storytelling platform, whether it's on video or it's audio? I'm not suggesting that it would be a docu-series. Maybe it's a TV show. Maybe it's a podcast. But do you think there will be a way where outside of print, we get to hear Vince McMahon tell some of these stories?
Vince is one of the best storytellers, and I'm talking about just as far as like a Ken Burns type that can tell stuff with video and documentaries. Vince is great at it. He and Kevin Dunn are obviously a team together, and he loves to tell stories. Like I say, a couple different things I'm talking about. He loves to tell stories in person. He loves, a lot of the old guys, the old boys, like us and girls, love to tell stories. It's what we do. It's one of the things that made the guys so entertaining back in the day, because we didn't have internet. We'd sit around and tell stories to entertain each other, and the boys love telling stories. Vince is one of those guys who loves telling it. Vince also is really good about telling video stories. You talk about like WWE and the documentaries they've done, the video packages they've done. They tell a story in 2 or 3 minutes and make you either like this guy or hate this guy or want to see this match. I don't have any inside knowledge of this, but my guess, nothing's 100%. As close to 100% as you can get. Vince is going to find some way to tell a story and be able to control how it's produced and how it's edited, not because he's going to take out any content, but because he wants it to be good. And I'd bet the farm on that.
Fingers
and I think
crossed.
it's Conrad. It's God Almighty. Is it going to be good? When you have access to so much video and stuff, which he probably will be able to get or probably will be allowed, he'll work out a deal. Vince is the ultimate deal maker. I say he will. I have no inside knowledge of this, so they're going to quote me anyway. It doesn't matter. But I think Vince is going to be able. Vince wants to be able to tell these stories and leave a legacy because there's so much one-sided stuff. When Vince tells his side of all this, a lot of people won't change their mind, but you're going to look at it and you're going to be absolutely blown away.
Well, listen, you brought it up, so I feel like I need to ask. Like, we saw a quote last week from Mark Shapiro, who's helping run TKO, and he said something along the lines of, "It's time for us to take the torch and move past the PLEs that were created by Vince McMahon." And he was using that as a way to explain that the launch of WrestlePalooza and its new IP and all the branding and messaging and all that worked out really well. So it's a rah-rah, but boy, it caught a lot of people off guard when there was a comment about moving on from WWE, or Vince McMahon created WWE PLEs. Specifically, fans wondering, what does this mean for WrestleMania? What does it mean for SummerSlam? What does it mean for Royal Rumble? What does it mean for Money in the Bank? What does it mean for Survivor Series? If I were a betting man, I would say there's no chance you just throw the baby out with the bathwater with those well-established IPs. Like, on some level, the brand WrestleMania is worth more than any other IP that WWE owns, in my opinion. So I just don't think they're going to do that, but maybe they are going to move away from the backlashes or the paybacks or some of those sort of second tier pay-per-views from a naming perspective and freshen up some IP. But a lot of fans, I thought, were kind of caught off guard by, we're trying to move on and move past the Vince McMahon. So I'm saying all that to say, when you insinuated that Vince maybe will work out a deal to have access to the footage, he's the ultimate deal maker or whatever, I think a lot of fans will hear that, John, and they'll say, wait, I thought Vince was in a more adversarial position with WWE. But for you to say he's the ultimate deal maker, maybe you don't think that's necessarily the case.
I don't know. I don't know what his relationship is.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't talk to the guys in WWE about Vince, and they don't talk to Vince about WWE.
Right.
So I don't know. I've seen Vince make deals for 30-something years I've been with WWE with people that he would say those guys don't like me. He would never said that, but that was pretty much the assumption with people that swore they'd never do business with him,
Right.
and they did. I mean, he's the ultimate business maker. I mean, God Almighty, Vince walks into a room, and that room changes. I've seen Vince in so many meetings, and I'm telling you, that guy is one of the best deal makers that I've ever seen. And if it makes sense, these guys at TKO are good deal makers as well. Look at what they've done with the television. If they see if they see something here, I don't think it's a matter of being friends. It's a matter of economics. And if it makes sense to both sides, I think they'll do it. And I don't know what the relationship is as far as Vince is still an owner of stock and all this. I don't know where that fits in, but I know it's two groups from TKO and from Vince who both make really big deals and intricate deals, and they're very good at it. And I think when you have people like that, whether there's animosity there or not, which I don't know if there is, I think stuff tends to get worked out. And as far as the PLEs being rethought, that's a Vince McMahonism. I mean, Vince would agree with that 100%. Vince is always day one. Everything to Vince was day one. What would you do if this is day one? Well, we've got this great pay-per-view. We've got this pay-per-view we do every single February or every single August or whatever. Okay, it's day one. Forget about what you've done in the past. Would you have it going forward? That's a Vince McMahonism. Them rethinking PLEs, that's exactly what they should do. You should be rethinking your business every single time you sit down with your group of people. Every single time you sit down with a group of people, this is Vince McMahon talking. It's got to be day one. And by day one, he means, okay, what you did yesterday, don't throw good money after bad, or don't throw bad money even after good, because something has played out. And so I think I applaud these guys for saying they're trying to move past it. That means they're thinking, and that means they're trying to come up with something. And I think it's exactly what they should be doing.
I love hearing your opinion. Of course, you had a lot to say about maybe hypothetically, potentially Vince writing a book. And now we're talking about Vince being a great storyteller. That really involves Vince sort of looking in the rearview mirror and talking about the way things were. And I know your quote got a lot of traction last week on social media when you recapped your meeting with Vince briefly right before they announced the TKO sale. Yeah. Where, he said he wasn't going to go quietly into the night, that sort of thing. Do you think that there will be, obviously we know that Vince is going to be creating new content to tell these stories, but do you think that would include future storytelling? Like, do you think that he'll get into some sort of bare knuckle fighting championships or pro wrestling or mixed martial arts, or has the promoter in Vince, have we seen the end of Vince the promoter?
I have no inside information on this. I always want to say that because this isn't coming from a conversation I had with Bruce or with Vince or with anybody else. This is me guessing based on knowing a person for over 3 decades and knowing him at times, pretty close. I think as long as his heart's beating, there's never going to be a time he's not out there. And by the way, he hates the word promoter. I told him one time, somebody had said something to me and I was mad about it. And I said, what if they called you an old wrestling promoter? He looked at me like I thought he was going to punch me. I said, see, you can't even say the word when I just say it jokingly. Vince hated that word. It was just something, it was like an old carny thing or whatever it was that he didn't like that term. But that's what we call it. So I certainly don't have a problem with it. And I'm not trying to say it to to get under his skin, because I'm sure he'll never hear this. But as far as promoter, if that's what we call it, I don't think Vince will ever quit that. I mean, how do you built this company? That's in your blood. You've done all this stuff your whole life, and you're the most driven person I've ever seen. I just don't see how you stop that. And by the way, when you talk about looking in the past, man, Vince is going to need help, by the way. Now, he has a good memory once you start reminding him. But Vince Vince is the biggest guy. And people talk about Vince, would forget stuff. Now, you got to understand, when he's at Gorilla, he would be controlling everything. He'd be controlling certain camera angles. He'd be controlling storylines. He'd be writing the show or rewriting the show. And he'd do a million things. And a lot of times he would forget what he had done 30 minutes before. It wasn't because he was crazy. When I got there in 95, people were saying, oh, Vince has lost it. When I was left, and people still now, oh, Vince has lost it. Same thing. He's the same. He's just done so many things, and he does so many things throughout the day that a lot of times he won't remember what he did 2 hours ago. Most people are that way. And Vince doesn't dwell on the past. So he doesn't dwell on his relationship with, I saw an old clip of him talking about Andre. And he said how he compartmentalized stuff, and, he moved on. Vince is the biggest day one guy moving on. So what he would have done is, a lot of times when he would have a documentary, he would have somebody sit there and read notes to him. This is what you did in 84. This is where the day, this. And all of a sudden it would come back to him and he would do it. So Vince is not a guy who dwells on the past, but I think for this project and his legacy, and again, I don't have any inside knowledge about a video or anything like that. I think Vince is going to take it very seriously and produce something that could be really incredible. But it's not something that he's used to doing is dwelling on the past.
Man, it's hard to believe that it was this week, years ago, where Brock Lesnar first became the UFC World Heavyweight Champion. I was at this fight. It was a phenomenal time. It was happening in Vegas. The tension in the air was because there was a whole lot of hardcore MMA fans who were not a fan of a quote unquote phony wrestler like WWE's Brock Lesnar coming over to UFC. And I think they had forgotten, or at least overlooked, or didn't want to acknowledge that Brock Lesnar was an NCAA champion, but he is fighting Randy Couture, who is the lineal UFC heavyweight champion. And it's only going to be Brock's 4th professional fight. He had great showings with Heath Herring, and we know that he tripped up against Frank Mir, but still, when you see a guy that you shared a locker room with fighting for the richest prize in combat sports, I mean, respectfully, I don't think heavyweight boxing had captured the imagination or was as hot as the UFC was here on the heels of the Ultimate Fighter. Now, certainly there's more money in boxing, but as far as what everybody was talking about, like the pop culture, the relevance of the UFC was through the roof at the time. What do you remember about this Brock Lesnar Randy Couture fight, and how much was everybody talking about it in the locker room?
We were thrilled to death. You know, I went out with, I believe, Undertaker, and went out to his first fight with Frank Mir, which unfortunately fell into a leg bar, and, those things happen, in combat sports, and he learned from it. And all of a sudden now he's up with Randy Couture. We're big fans of Randy Couture too. That guy's a badass stud, man. And he didn't just, he's like one of these fighters, he's not like just a guy who became champion. He's a stud. He's a badass dude. He's a real tough guy. Seemed like a good guy. I've never met him. And so we got Brock now fighting this guy that we know is this hardcore, old school type fighter. And we're thrilled to death. I mean, we can't wait to see this fight. And, I didn't go to it in person. We watched it on obviously on pay-per-view. We're so happy for Brock. I could not believe that he beat Randy Couture. Oh, I could. I say I couldn't believe because we were so happy and excited for him.
It was unbelievable. I mean, the heel persona of Brock Lesnar in UFC was helped born that night. There were so many boos for him when he came out.
Tell me you can't draw money if you stay in character.
I loved it, man. There were fights all around me. I mean, I saw the Las Vegas Police Department like belly to belly suplexing dudes or belly to back suplexing dudes right on the steps because people were fighting mad. There were some very vocal WWE fans there supporting Brock. And these MMA guys, man, they were not here for it. It was an environment that was unlike any other UFC I remember going to. But I don't think a lot of people would have ever predicted it. Like when they saw Randy stopping Brock's takedowns, I think a lot of people assumed, well, Brock's got a great wrestling background and he's got the weight advantage. He'll be able to take him down. That did not prove to be the case. But when those big lunch boxes started coming at Randy Couture's head, and he tried to turn his head to slip one, and down goes Couture. It was a moment I don't think I'll ever forget, John.
Me either. And you were there, right?
Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. One of the greatest fights of all time, or one of the most historic fights of all time. I couldn't believe it either. Brock was, from what I understand, was not a technical great wrestler, amateur wrestler. He was just a beast. He just beat people up. That's what he did in UFC. I mean, he had 4 matches and he's the UFC champion and beats one of the greatest champions of all time. That's insane. And plus, you're right, he knocked him down with the punch. But when you got freaking meat hooks that big and you're so freaking strong, it doesn't take a lot for something like that to happen. It's just Brock's a genetic freak. For Couture to fight against Brock, he has to fight the perfect fight. For Brock to win against Couture, he just has to not make any really stupid mistakes and let him get caught in something or get caught by something really flush on the jaw or something. Brock has more ways to win in this than Couture does because of the freaking size he has and because he's just an absolute athletic freak. I mean, I don't know if we'll ever see anything like Brock again. I got to be on the same team for a very short time with Bo Jackson. I mean, that's the closest I can say to Brock Lesnar is a Bo Jackson or a Jordan or something. I mean, Brock is one of these athletes of our generation that we're not going to see again. I would not think. I hope we do, because that'd be cool if we did. If we did, my God, I can't believe what he looked like. But I just don't think we will.
It was an unbelievable night, and we know 9 months later I think a lot of people assumed they were going to do like Lesnar, Nogueira or something, but instead they went with a rematch for him and Frank Mir. It was UFC 100. That show would be so stacked and set so many records. And it's where we really saw Brock Lesnar cut a pro wrestling style promo afterwards. And they even did like a countdown, which had become sort of the in fashion thing to do with guys like Floyd Mayweather and Manny Pacquiao on HBO's 24/7 as they built towards the fight for 3 weeks. They did that with Lesnar and Mir and showed Lesnar like kicking a door off its hinges. I feel like that's when Dana really started to lean back into the pro wrestling style of promotion a little bit. But the legacy and the legend of Brock Lesnar, I think, really started on this week back in 2008 when he upset the world with that big win over Randy Couture.
I do too, and it's what I say all the time. It's one of the things I quote. Tell me you can't work people today. I know this was, 20 years ago, but so what? Brock worked them. I mean, the easiest people to work are these hardcore fans, these MMA fans that, don't mess with our sacred sport. Man, this guy was one of the NCAA champion and was a freaking beast when he won it. So he is one of you guys too. He just happens to be one of us as well. But Brock never left character. This is what I say all the time, Conrad, about like Conor McGregor, about Floyd Mayweather, about Brock Lesnar. When Brock won these fights, he didn't all of a sudden say at the end of it, that was just part of my pro wrestling persona. I really like these guys. That was just building up for the fight. Brock stayed in character. Maybe it's not a character. I think it is. I know Brock, and I think it is, but maybe it's not. But you draw money that way. That's when I talk about guys with, today, when they come up, they use that social media and they do something completely opposite their character. Say, it doesn't matter. Everybody knows. And, okay, you're right. You're right. But you're never going to be the top person if you do that, ever. You're never going to be the guy that draws the big money if you do that ever. And all you got to do is look at Brock Lesnar to see a perfect example of how to draw money.
Well, we've had a lot of happy anniversaries that we wanted to celebrate this week, but there is a pretty sad note. 20 years ago this week is when we learned that Eddie Guerrero had passed away. We talked about his last match here on the program last week, but it was 20 years ago this week where we found out that Eddie passed away in Minneapolis just before our Raw and SmackDown taping. I think the roster was about to head for their traditional November European tour, and you find out a beloved member of the locker room has passed away. And this happens at a time when, and boy, this is even hard to think about, but back then it had become kind of, we had heard about guys like Davey Boy Smith and Brian Pillman and Eddie Gilbert and Chris Candido, and all of these guys are dying in their 30s. And that feels different than when we heard a generation before that we were using or losing guys like, Kurt Hennig or the Big Boss Man, or that era of guys starting to pass away, maybe with most of their wrestling career in the rearview mirror. But this is a guy who most people would argue he's at the peak of his career. He's on the main roster. He's in the title picture. And I'm not saying we're desensitized to retired wrestlers passing away too soon. You never get desensitized to something like that, but it feels different when it's a guy who's on TV every week, doesn't it, John?
It certainly does. And, of course, I was a lot closer with Eddie than I was good friends with a lot of those guys, but very close with Eddie. And also Eddie was completely clean and sober. Not that added, I'm not going to even dream about saying what could have happened or didn't happen. I'm not going to dream about that. But Eddie was completely sober. Eddie was not on anything, and then he passes away, just unexpectedly brushing his teeth one morning. I mean, I think that added to a lot of it. If you'd seen a guy that, he had to leave WWE, they're all hooked on something and they go to rehab and it doesn't work. And all of a sudden you hear about him passing away. You might can understand it. I think it was much harder with Eddie because you had a guy here that was so clean and sober, who was a good Christian man and did so much for so many people. And I think that's one of the reasons that added to how unexpected this was. And I remember walking into Minneapolis, the Target Center that day, and I remember seeing Chavo and Ray together, and I knew something was horribly wrong. First people I saw, they were over by one of the cases in the back by what we used to call Magic, the props department. And I walked over there, and of course they told me, and it was, horrifying, incredibly sad news, beyond sad news. But but it was really shocking. And I think a lot of that came about because Eddie had such a good lifestyle and a clean lifestyle. And then all of a sudden something happens one morning, it's just, unfortunately it was his time.
Let's talk about tribute shows. You and I have never really spent any time talking about this, but you guys did an Eddie Guerrero tribute show. And I know there's been a few of those through the years, but I really want to talk about the Eddie one. I mean, this has to be mixed emotions because you've got people trying to leave for a European tour immediately after this. And I know that Jeff Jarrett has talked about this on his podcast, that he never really processed the death of Owen. He had been sharing a car with Owen and riding with Owen. They had been tag team champions together, and they had just bonded over, them both getting into their dream homes and having their families there, and, being second or I guess third generation wrestlers, and they had so much in common. And then immediately when Owen passes away, the very first match after that, Jeff's walking around and he can feel the broken boards underneath him. And then, hey, we're going to go to a funeral, and then it's time to get back on the road again. And he didn't deal with that until years later when he started his recovery and realized that alcohol had become a big coping mechanism for him. But I can't help but think, man, one of my very best friends died. We're going to do a tribute show, and then we're going to get on a plane and go to Europe and keep doing our job. And I know that's what, guys in that era, that's what men did. I get it. But on some level, that's a lot to ask a person, is it not, John?
Yeah, it is. My wife was going to meet me in Europe and go on the European tour with me. I think we're going to Italy first. I can't remember. And she had just landed in Italy, and I called her and I think it was Italy. I think it's where we're going. I called her and told her that Eddie had just passed away. And, he was a groomsman at my wedding. His family was there, at my wedding, and we're very close. And she literally didn't leave the airport, got on a flight, flew right back to America so she could be at the funeral down in, I guess it was Phoenix or where it was in Arizona. So we didn't go straight overseas. We went to the funeral. I believe that's right. I went to the funeral first. I believe that's right. I'm not 100% sure about that. Maybe somebody should better check that, but yeah, it was, you get there and you find out that one of your best friends has passed away and leaves his whole family, and you're packed to go to Europe. You call your wife, she flies back, and I believe that's I believe that's how everything happened. Is what I think happened, because it's a long time ago and it's pretty traumatic. So could have some of this wrong. And if I do, forgive me. It's not on purpose. And then all of a sudden you got to wrestle a match, and remember that night I was going to work with Chavo, and the initial plan was for me to go over. I said, there is no way in hell I'm doing a tribute show for Eddie Guerrero, wrestling a Guerrero and doing anything but doing a job right in the middle of the ring to a frog splash. And Vince completely agreed. So did everybody. And so they changed the finish, and that's obviously what we did.
I just looked it up, and it looks like I hate even having to look that up, but Eddie's funeral service was November 17th. So I know you said you wanted us to try to check that. So I'm taking a look now to see what I can come up with.
And what day did he pass away?
He passed away on the 13th. And you guys, that's when you found out that morning, and you had 6,000 fans in the building for that tribute show that night at the Target Center in Minneapolis.
And I think Conrad, I'm sorry, go ahead.
2 days later, there was a show in Germany on the 15th. There was a show in Italy on the 15th. There was another show in Germany on the 16th, another show in Milan, Italy on the 16th, a show in Manchester on the 17th, another show in Italy on the 17th. So the tour still happened, but I'm sure that lots of things had to change.
Is there a way to check to see if I was on that tour? Because I don't think I was. I don't think I was I don't think I went to the tour until after the funeral, is what I think. Because I did part of the eulogy, so I was certainly at the funeral, and I don't think I flew to Europe first and then came back. I think
you were in Italy on the 19th.
Okay, so that's what happened.
You were at the funeral on the 17th, and you made it to Italy on the 19th, and then they did SmackDown. On the 20th.
Yep. So a few of us that were obviously very close to Eddie, as far as I remember. I know I didn't go to Europe until after the funeral and after the burial and everything like that, because I did part of the eulogy. So I knew I was there, but I wouldn't, I'm not going to, certainly going to be at the funeral. And yeah, it's one of those things, what do you do? I mean, I don't know the answer. I didn't know the answer when Owen died. I went out after that, I have no idea. I was the one that told, I think Steve and Undertaker that Owen had passed away in the ring. They were going over their match in the back there in Kansas City on the other side of Gorilla. I remember the dressing room. I remember walking in there and talking to him. What are you going to do? It's just there's I don't think there's a good answer.
There's not a good answer. It just sucks, and I appreciate you being open and being able to talk to us about it. But I know that there's a lot of positive change that'll come from Eddie Guerrero's passing. I know they're going to change.
Hey, and by the way, Conrad, I want to say I really enjoyed, and I say enjoyed. It was a tribute to Eddie, working with Eddie that night, working with Chavo that night at the Eddie tribute. I mean, I thought that was, as crazy as it sounded, I thought that was important. What was important was Eddie being alive. I'd change all that for Eddie being alive. Don't get me wrong, but I thought it was important, the match we had, at least, that if you're at the tribute show and this is his nephew and they're close like brothers and they're both Guerreros from a famous family. I'm wrestling a Guerrero. I thought that was important. I felt like that was important for me to go out there and have just as good a match as I could have with Chavo and put him over like a freaking $1 million, and that was, that was kind of, I don't know. So I can say a tribute to Eddie. It was, but I thought it was also kind of important to be out there. And I'm glad that I was in that role. I'm sad that the role happened because I wish Eddie was still here today, but I'm glad that at least the worst part about it, and it was horrible, was to be in that role.
I wanted to ask you, I know there's a lot of positive change that comes out of Eddie's passing. The WWE is going to change some of their medical screening policies and the things they're doing with the physicals and the way they're looking at the heart. And they're going to save some lives, or certainly extend some lives with things they discover as a result of Eddie's passing. So if there's a silver lining, maybe that's it. But I did want to ask, and I know we didn't know, we're all getting better. We're all learning. But was there a grief counselor for you guys to talk to somebody? Because if I'm honest with you, it never even crossed my mind that there may be a need for that until I heard Jeff talk about the fact that he never really processed it. It was just, hey, let's stuff it away and pack a bag because we got a town to make. And we were just right back to work. And I know that there had to be a lot of quiet car rides and plane rides and maybe a cocktail or two too many in the days or weeks and months that followed. But was there an official, because I know WWE's always been big on rehab for guys who have like substance abuse issues and things like that. But a grief counselor, was that even part of a discussion back then, or were we all just trying to figure it out together?
We were all just trying to figure it out together. And I don't think, I wouldn't have gone to one. Not that they're not viable, and it's not something that I'd ever considered. And a lot of guys are like me, but a lot of guys would probably go and would have probably benefited huge from it. Don't know. Business doesn't have it. Most businesses don't have it and I know what people are going to say. Well, most businesses don't have a lot of people die. I get that. I understand all that. But it's just not something that's standard anywhere. So, should we have? I don't know.
Well,
How do you know somebody's going to, this great person everybody loves all of a sudden is going to pass away one morning? You don't know that. And then you're calling stuff on the fly. You're figuring out what to do minute by minute. You have no idea what to do.
To be clear, I wasn't pretending to suggest that WWE should have had a grief counselor. I'm saying it never even crossed my mind until I heard that Jeff had learned through recovery and through therapy that he had never really dealt with that. And it was sort of, he had never dealt with like the root cause of his substance abuse. And that he didn't really understand that was just a masking agent or a coping mechanism. And all I'm suggesting is we know WWE, even by this point in 05, they were already paying for guys who had a monkey on their back, so to speak, to go to rehab. But I'm wondering the guys who were here, like I can't imagine. It just feels like if that sort of thinking existed, and it didn't, I don't just think with WWE, but by and large, I don't think it existed back then, but we're all just learning and evolving and getting better. But it does feel like, hey man, if your coworker didn't show up to work today because he died, whether it was Eddie or it was the tragedy of Benoit or anything, man, a grief counselor may have done a lot of people a lot of good way back when.
It could have.
Yeah.
Yeah, it certainly could have. And I don't know the answer. I mean, yeah, it could have. I don't think anybody thought about it. It was stuff just happening to you. And, you look at pictures now from, back in the day, and you look at it and, half the guys in some pictures are dead. I mean, you look at, our friend Kevin, and you realize, Scott's passed away, Hogan's passed away, 2/3 of the NWO has passed away.
And his son.
And his son, yeah, it was horrible, man. I've heard him talk about his son, who he loved so much. We did a couple shows together that were right across from a restaurant we went to that was right across from the hospital where his son was for so long. Horrible tragedy, But you look at it, and you can't figure out why. And sometimes you look at stuff like that, and that's when you ask the questions like, I wonder why, and I wonder why I'm the one that survived. And I know Ron told me the other day, he said something about most of the guys that have passed away, from heart attacks and stuff like that, and he said it was like 58 to 64 was kind of the main years, and I think he's now 64 or 65, whatever it is. And he was saying, I think I kind of may have made it through the sweet spot, and he wasn't being funny. He was just kind of saying, hey, that's kind of the time in life when you have artery blockages and things like that, and because being athletes and our lifestyles was certainly not good for our health, and the stuff we ate, we ate too much protein, we ate too much everything. We live a carnivore lifestyle, which depends on how you're living it. The way we lived it was not the right way to do it. And because of that, a lot of these guys have health issues older, and plus we did a lot of bad things for our body. And, you look at them and, sometimes you do wonder why. And so, yeah, I think something like that would have been very beneficial. Conrad, we're just calling it as it comes along. Right. We're just trying to make it through to the next hour some of these days. And we didn't know what to do. I mean, we found out in the third hour of the Benoit tribute that Benoit most likely did it. And now all of a sudden, what do? We had to do our tribute to Benoit. Like, what do you do now? You're calling stuff on the fly. People can look at it and go, you guys shouldn't have done this. You guys should have done that. Buddy, you be there. You make the best decision you can. That's all you can do. And you hope to do the right thing and the right thing for everybody involved. But when you're got it that close to the fire, I mean, sometimes you get burned.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It's time to count down the top 5. Brought to you by SaveWithConrad.com.
Pretty excited about this one, John. We're going to do, and this is based on a suggestion we got over on Twitter. Shout out to the Twitter love. If you haven't already, interact with us on Twitter. We are at Pritchard Show. And I guess we need to change that handle now since you're saying it's your show. But either way.
I stole your fucking podcast.
Well, there you go. Today we've got John's top 5 hell of a good hands list. So who are sort of the unsung heroes to help make the stars and keep the train on the track and keep these territories rolling? First things first, let's clear up some confusion. Fans have heard that as much as it's an honor to be described as a good hand or a hell of a hand, I don't think some wrestlers like that label, and they worry that it may pigeonhole them into being just a good hand. Maybe it puts a glass ceiling on their upward mobility. Where are you with the phrase good hand or hell of a good hand? Is it a compliment or is it a backhanded compliment, John?
Both. And look, I picked the top 5. I don't have, for instance, D'Lo Brown in it and several other guys. I mean, there's hundreds of guys that were good hands. We called them either mechanics or carpenters back in the day. And yeah, there's a glass ceiling about it, because the problem is if you're a good hand, you can do anything. And if you can do anything, odds are you will do anything. So, they're going to bring a guy in. Oh, this guy really can't work, but he's got this great look. Who we put him with? Oh, let's put him with the good hand. Let's put him with the mechanic, with the carpenter. He can get him over. Well, you might get him over. That guy might never become a championship, but it limits the good hand because he's good at what he does. So, yeah, there definitely is a glass ceiling to it. So it is a kind of a bit of a, I don't know about an insult, to say you're a good hand, but, if you're people talk all the time about you being a good hand, odds are you're not going to be the top guy very often. Now you may be sometimes. We have in our top 5 list, we have a multi-time world champion in there who is considered a good hand, a mechanic, carpenter. But for the most part, these guys are guys who would come in that could work anywhere from the main event match to the opening match. They're not jobbers, certainly not. They're not even, I guess you'd call them enhancement guys, but we're all enhancement guys. But they're guys that can get over storylines and angles. They are so valuable. You've got to have at least 1 or 2 of these guys in any territory.
Well, let's talk about it. Here we go with John's top 5 of his good hands. Coming in at number 5 on the Hell of a Hand talent list is Savio Vega. Now, I love this answer because I think you and I both know, man, he helps so many people from Steve Austin to Goldust on down the line. Why does Savio Vega come in at number 5 on your top 5 good hands list?
Because Savio is a hell of a worker. And anybody who's considered a good hand is a hell of a worker. I mean, anybody who talks about Savio will tell you one of the first things they say, hell of a worker. And look, that's people can take the good hand and say, oh man, that's kind of a backhanded comment. I'll tell you what, it's not with Savio. Savio was just that good. He was my tryout match. I got lucky because I had Savio. Savio was my first storyline, my first pay-per-view. He was Stone Cold's one of his first big. Do we want to take Steve to that next level? Think about that. You got a guy, Steve, who becomes the biggest star of maybe all time. Savio was the one that helped propel him up to that. And Steve will tell you that too. Steve will talk about how great a worker Savio is. Savio could be a champion, but Savio could also be in the first match. Savio could do absolutely anything. When you're out there with one of these good hands, as we call them, in this top 5 list, you're going to have a great match. You know it's going to be easy. You know it's going to be a night off, and you know it's going to be a lot of fun out there. And Savio Vega, buddy, he could be number 1. Savio Vega is one of the best workers I've ever seen. He is just absolutely invaluable to any place. He can cut a promo. He can wrestle. He can do absolutely anything. Savio Vega is perfect as one of these hell of a hands, these great workers.
Let's take a look at John's list on number 4 on his list of hell of a hands. The top 5 hell of a hands with JBL coming in at number 4. Brad Armstrong. I got to think he's on everybody's list, John.
Oh
why
my God.
For you?
Yeah, if you have hell of a hand list, everybody has Brad Armstrong on it. There's no doubt about that. Anybody who ever saw Brad Armstrong wrestle or who heard about Brad Armstrong wrestle will tell you he's one of the greatest wrestlers of all time. That guy was God's gift to wrestling. He could do anything. He used a Russian leg sweep as a finish. That's how good he was. I saw Brad have a match with Fit Finley, and I believe it was in Bremen. It was in northern Germany. It was Bremen or Hanover. I think it was Bremen. One of the best matches I've ever seen. It's just shocking how good it was. When you sit there and watch, you go, my God, man, because we all knew how great Finley was. I'd never seen Brad in person until then. I'd heard about him. But when you're watching it going, my God, this guy is exactly where he needs to be. He's doing everything he's supposed to do. This match is freaking gold. And you're just sitting there watching going, my God, I don't want it to end. I wanted them to wrestle forever. It was that freaking good. Brad is one of these guys that, my God, man, you wish he hadn't passed away, but especially at such a young age. I mean, you don't want him to pass away anytime until they're old people. But Brad was one of these guys that could do anything in any territory, and anybody who knows him will tell you he was one hell of a hand.
Well, coming in on John's number 3 spot for his top 5 hell of a hands, Black Bart. Now, this is a name I didn't expect. I knew you had a soft spot for him. But number 3, chat me up, John.
Anybody that knew Bart will tell you this. Anybody. Bart could be champion, and he was champion. Bart could also be your first match, and he was first match sometimes. Bart could do anything in between. When I tell you that Bart could cut a promo, it is shocking how good he was. Bart could talk. Bart could have done commentary. Bart could cut promos. Bart could sell people into seats, and then Bart could work. Bart was a good heel. He was also a good babyface. I thought he was a better heel. But man, Bart could work. When guys came in, he and Johnny Mantell, bless their heart, got put with me and Dunkel having to teach us in the ring. Do the same thing with Goldust. Dustin sent him to Black Bart to learn how to work in the ring. There were finishers a lot, guys, like Brad Ryangens, Hiro Matsuda, Billy Robinson, Carl Gotch. Those guys were your great trainers before people got in the ring. There were guys like Black Bart that would train people once they got into the ring. Bart filled that role. Bart was the ultimate mechanic, carpenter, whatever you want to call it. Bart was a guy you need in any territory.
Man, I love hearing about Bart because I can tell the love is coming through. You're a big Bart guy.
Yep.
And I'll admit, I didn't expect your number 2 on JBL's top 5 list of hell of a hands. A bona fide Hall of Famer has made the list, boys and girls. John's got down Billy Gunn at number 2.
Yes.
He's had a Hall of Fame career, but I don't think a lot of fans would immediately jump to say, oh, that guy was a hell of a hand. Drop some knowledge on us. Why is Billy Gunn your number 2?
And the thing about this is, that's about the thing when you talk about a hell of a hand. I mean, there's no limitation to them. They could be champions on the main event. Billy was a main eventer, Hall of Famer, and they could also be in the first match. I mean, they're just good workers. Billy was just a really good worker. It is to this day, and I'll address that in just a second. We were over in Japan. I'll tell you how good Billy is. Billy worked with, I believe, Heidenreich. And Heidenreich was Heidenreich, I liked John, nice guy, but not an advanced wrestler like Billy. Billy went out there with him in some match in Tokyo or somewhere. Who knows? Somewhere over in Japan. We were on a tour over there doing some dates. And he had this match that was just phenomenal. And he came back and I said, buddy, did you screw up? Did you ever screw up? And he goes, and he looked at me and goes, yes, I did. I said, because now they're going to put you with anybody they need to get over because they know how good you can work. And that's what they did. Good hand guys like Billy could be taken advantage of, which we're going to get the number 1 in a minute, was certainly taken advantage of. But that's where Billy fit in. Billy could have a match with anybody. I saw a comeback he did. You need to find this video for all you fans out there. There's a 6-man match where Billy does a comeback. To this day, I think that's the greatest comeback I've ever seen. Billy was a ridiculous athlete. We're playing at some charity basketball game one time. He had free throws missed. He catches the ball in there and dunks it. He'd come in from the side like Jordan did. Like, oh my God, why is this guy on our roster? This guy's a super athlete. But Billy was one of those guys that you need. And that's what I'd say about hell of a hand. They can be your top guy. They can also be your opening match guy. Billy fits this because Billy was such a freaking good worker. And you look at him now, I think he's 62 now and got that incredible body. He still make him world champion. And I would if I was that group down there. I think that'd be a hell of a storyline, and he could do it still.
How about that? I'll admit I didn't see that on my bingo card today, but man, you got my curiosity piqued because you said that sometimes these guys get taken advantage of, they get abused a little bit. I mean, I'm going to go ahead and hit it. I got to hear who number 1 is on your list of the top 5 hell of a hands. Dolph Ziggler? I mean, listen, I agree. I wouldn't have necessarily thought to put him in this spot, but you're right. He was abused. That's the way we fans thought about it.
Yeah.
You're on commentary for a lot of it. You saw it. Tell us why Dolph is number 1 on your list.
I called most of his matches during those years. I mean, Dolph is a first ballot Hall of Famer. He's this incredible athlete. Look at his collegiate record. Held the pin record as college or high school, whatever it was. He held records in amateur wrestling. He is as good now athletically as he was, it looks like, when I first saw him. I'm sure he probably feels aches and pains and thinks he's an old man, but good Lord, he doesn't act like one. But Dolph is a guy, here is a multi-time world champion who could have been just a top guy, but because he was such a good worker, I was in creative meetings all the time when you'd have some guy come in that was not such a great worker, and you think, what are we going to do? Oh, let's get Dolph. That's where you take advantage of hell of a hands. Dolph was so good and could do absolutely anything. And right when I'm talking about it, you put up a picture of Cesaro. So it's certainly not Cesaro, who is also another hell of a hand, by the way. But they would say, well, let's get Dolph. And you put Dolph out there with somebody because the person couldn't work. The person wasn't that good. And Dolph would make them look like a freaking professional. I don't know about $1 million because you only do so much. You can't turn a dime into $1. Even Dolph had a problem with that with some of these guys. but they took advantage of Dolph because Dolph was so freaking good. That's what happens to Hell of a Hands is you sit there and you go, okay, what are we going to do with this person? This guy's not that great a worker. What are we going to do? Oh, get Dolph. Dolph can do it. Well, of course he can. And he did time after time again. And Dolph now to this day is one of the best wrestlers in the world. I mean, I've seen him recently in some of these independent matches. Man, that guy is, buddy, he's different level. He is still that Hall of Famer, that world champion. I don't know what people are going to do with him, but there's something there for Dolph, and somebody should find it in this next year.
I can't wait to hear what you guys think. Who would you put on your top 5 list for your top 5 Hell of a Hand performers? I think Brad Armstrong's going to be on a lot of lists. I'm sure Dolph Ziggler is going to be on a lot of lists. Maybe there's some other sneaky surprises out there. I wouldn't have guessed Billy Gunn was on John's list. We want to hear from you. Let us know in the comments below who your top 5 guys are when it comes to being a hell of a hand in the wrestling business. Somebody who is getting a little bit of traction online this weekend, I don't know if you saw this, was a friend of the show, rapper Westside Gunn. I know you've seen some of his independent stuff with his promotion, Fourth Rope. He's had a lot of WWE features in his albums for years. Hell, a couple of weeks ago, we all saw that billboard in Times Square of the $1 Million Man and Virgil. I mean, he is as in on wrestling as you can be when you're not only attending the events and paying the big money it costs to sit front row or get a suite, not just for WWE, but other promotions as well. But he's clearly just a mega wrestling fan. Hell, he started his own wrestling promotion, but I guess it comes out that he was removed from the show over the weekend. WWE asked him to leave and kicked him out of the building after he paid $5,000 for the seats. So clearly he's rubbed somebody at TKO the wrong way. I don't know what happened. You don't know what happened, but I guess part of the issue here is he had been using some audio drops from WWE programming in his albums. And I guess now those are going to be removed. And I mean, you see the old album cover right there, like what a cool album cover that is from a hip hop standpoint. And of course that belt that's being featured there is not the $1 million belt that WWE owns. That is his world title belt for Fourth Rope. I don't know. It feels like this was a good thing for WWE and for Westside Gunn because I don't know. It felt collaborative, like it's an unpaid marketing arm. TKO, I guess, saw it differently. Were you surprised to see this news over the weekend?
Yeah, I was, and I've been reading about it today, and I want to say clearly that I've worked for Westside Gunn, and they were fantastic. I mean, they run a great show. They're big wrestling guys, but they run a legit wrestling show, and they treated me absolutely fantastic. I worked for them twice, and both times, absolute first class, 100% of everything they did, first class. So I really enjoyed it. I never could figure out what the whole beef is. I guess it's the auto drops that he used from WWE, I guess without permission. You know, there's some type of supposed, which is kind of a very ambiguous, kabuki-ish type gray area of 6-second window of some things you can use and things you can't. There's a lot of things out there that are claims that I'm not sure are backed up by legality, but are not necessarily enforced. I don't know if that's part of it or not. I didn't understand fully what happened between WWE and Westside Gunn. I hate to see it because I like them. I like Westside Gunn. They're, as far as I know, they're good dudes. You know, I had a great time visiting with them and talking to them and working for them, working with them. I was there with Godfather in one of their shows, and we had a hell of a good time. So I don't know exactly how they got so cross. I wish they could have handled it in a way that wasn't so public.
I totally agree. You know, I think we all know that wrestling at different times has been pigeonholed in. There is, whether we want to acknowledge it or not, a negative perception about wrestling fans. And I think that it has been an opportunity to grow through hip hop that I wish wrestling was embracing a little more. It wasn't that long ago that Offset had a platinum record, Ric Flair Drip. And then you see a guy like Westside Gunn who features so many wrestlers on his cover art. He features so many wrestlers on his album titles, like the titles of the tracks. He'll have little audio samples of famous wrestling moments in wrestling history or promos. And I don't know. It just feels like that hip hop association with pro wrestling could have been a real opportunity. And hell, we saw earlier this year, Travis Scott involved in the freaking main event of WrestleMania. I don't know. It feels like I almost want to throw the flag here. Like, damn, I wish WWE could figure this out with West Side Gun, but I don't know. It feels like there was a missed, maybe there's miscommunication. Maybe it's a lost opportunity, to say the least, in my opinion, John.
Yeah, I certainly don't know WWE's side of the story, and from what I read, I couldn't find any part of it. So I don't know what they felt so compelled to, throw him out of the building in such a public way. Because anything you do with him is a public way, and he was sitting ringside and paid a lot of money. I don't understand it, and I don't want to necessarily take a side because I don't know. I'm not being for WWE or for West Side Gun. I like them both. I don't understand what there was that they felt so compelled to forcibly take him out of an arena. It didn't make sense to me because I didn't see their side of the story. Maybe when I see it, maybe it somehow makes sense. It seems like an overreach right now, Conrad. I feel the same way, that it seems like a flag may have to be thrown. I don't know. I wish they could have done it in some way that was not public.
Can I throw you a curveball you're not expecting?
Yes.
I talked to Jeff Jarrett earlier today, and he said it's got to be a work.
Really?
And if it's a work,
oh my God, that'd be great.
That's what I'm saying. Like I'm saying, please God, let this be a work. This would be the best story going.
Holy shit, that's great.
I would love it.
Oh my, I didn't go. Good Lord, Conrad. I'm the first one to think that's awesome. That would be awesome.
I totally agree.
I mean, those guys have a huge following. They've done great stuff. I don't know, WWE didn't explain the side of the story. I mean, this could be a work. And they've got their own wrestling promotion. I mean, they do a good job. I think Enzo is one of the ones that's working a lot behind the scenes with them. But man, they do a hell of a job. I love the stuff they've done. And they draw in I don't know about a different audience. Our audience is very diverse now. Maybe it always was, but talent wasn't. But now, but audience may or may not have been. But if it's a work, oh my God, that'd be awesome.
I would love it.
Be
so
really
much.
good.
It could be a home run idea. And listen, I'm
good
a West
for
Side
Jeff
Gun.
Jarrett. That's you know what that is. That's a freaking second generation freaking promoter's kid.
Third generation.
That's right.
I mean, wow. Hey, I felt the same way you did when he said it's a work. I went, oh my God, I didn't even think of that. That could be. I don't think it is, but it would be amazing if it is. And Lord, I hope it is.
Oh, that would be awesome if it was.
But I will say this. Listen, I can be honest because I'm a wrestling fan and I've heard it my whole life. But there's a lot of people, and I'm not saying wrestling fans. I'm saying women older than you and I, who would hear that you and I are watching wrestling, and they may say something like, "Oh, you still watch that stuff?" implying that we haven't grown out of it, or we don't know it's the F word, or whatever they say. So it's perceived by a certain section of society that it's corny, or it's lame, or it's cheesy, or it's lowbrow entertainment. And maybe it is, and maybe that's why I love it so much, because I'm all of those things. But I do think the association with hip hop, whether you like that kind of music or you don't, most people who listen to it because they think it's cool and they would describe it as cool. And clearly it's been really, really popular over the last 3 decades. So I get some of our audiences, I don't even know what a West Side Gun is. Why do I care? Because you want freaking wrestling to grow. And in order for wrestling to grow, you've got to reach people that you don't normally reach. So if there was a large contingent of the hip hop community that wasn't paying attention to wrestling, and he's brought any attention to it, it's a value add for wrestling. So I hope if it's not a work, it can become one, and WWE and West Side Gun do something fun together.
Yeah, I do too. I think that'd be awesome if it was. And I completely agree with all the sentiment about it. When I got the author of the book, and Jerry's going to get mad at me. Mr. Briscoe's going to get mad at me. The author's going to get mad at me. Wrote a great book. We had him on our show, and I can't think of his name right now. Wrote a book on black wrestlers, back before the 1950s. It's just a fantastic book. And we had two different stories there, 2 different books. But, you didn't have a lot of black wrestlers. Now, you had a segregated world at the time and stuff like that. But now the wrestling world has become diverse. Now it's, you've got blacks, whites, brown, it doesn't matter. And now you've got women that are just as equal or more so than men. I mean, the wrestling world has really come into the world. And I think this is part of that. Now all of a sudden you've got this incredible hip hop mogul. We've had Snoop Dogg before, before that. We always had great music stars that have come in from different diverse backgrounds, but I think it's great what they're doing. I don't know how big the hip hop world is. I don't know how big the country world is. I don't know how big anybody's world is except for mine right down here in my little basement. So not my mom's basement though. I do own the house.
I love that you wanted to qualify. Not my mom's basement, and you pointed up. I do own the house, aka that woman you hear in the background is not. She is Mrs. Layfield, but she's my Mrs. Layfield.
That's right.
Hey, I wanted to mention the book you're referencing is written by Ian Douglas.
Ian Douglas, yes. I love Ian Douglas. Oh my God, thank you for telling me. Thank you.
The name of the book, if you're curious, is A Decided Novelty: The Essential Guide to Black Pro Wrestling History, 1880 to 1950. Shout out to Mike Johnson, who I know did the foreword, but Ian Douglas is the author, and the name of the book is A Decided Novelty. You can grab it over on Amazon right now. Listen, I got my fingers crossed for West Side Gun. It's going to be a fun weekend. I know that there's a lot of great wrestling that's going to happen this weekend, but I'm kind of fired up that at the end of this month, you're going to be at WrestleCade on your birthday. Right. And that's also the day Survivor Series is happening. There's a lot happening on the 29th.
There sure is. My birthday going to be at a wrestling event, a wrestling convention. There's a wrestling match that night. I'm packing my clotheslines to come into lines, not necessarily just multiple clotheslines. Yes. And also Survivor Series. This is a big weekend. I'm looking forward to it.
It is going to be fun. Make plans to join us at WrestleCade. John's going to be there signing autographs, taking pictures. I think Ron Simmons is going to be there too. So there may be an opportunity to get like an APA combo if I had to guess, right?
They're 100% Ron Simmons is going to be there. I hardly go anywhere that Ron Simmons isn't. So if people want to get me booked, they just say, who Ron's going to be here? Okay, I'll be there. We love sitting there talking about college football and being together. We're friends.
And there's lots of questions that you and I get on social media. Sometimes people say, hey, when Bruce comes back, and you've already said you've taken over this podcast, so we've got that settled. But people
Bradshaw 316
says,
I just stole your fucking podcast.
Coming to a she-shirt near you soon. But we still get the question, hey, if and when Bruce comes back, I want you to do something with JBL. I want you to do something with Conrad. And allegedly, hypothetically, there's rumor and innuendo that maybe we're working on our next idea this month, John.
And it could be a hell of an idea. It could be a little bit of a divergence from anything. It's like I always say, if Piper used to always tell me, you can't out Hulk the Hulk. So if the top guy's doing something or whatever else, or everybody's doing one thing, if everybody's smiling, you frown. If everybody's frowning, you smile. So if we're doing a podcast, we might not necessarily want to do a typical podcast with pictures or videos or things like that. We might want to spice it up a little bit and have a little bit of a divergence and have more of a variety type show.
Stay tuned, boys and girls. We'll have more news in the coming weeks. And don't forget to plan to celebrate JBL's birthday with him at WrestleCade November 29th. And we'll see you next week right here on Something to Wrestle with John Layfield. No more question marks.